Hi everyone, this is Professor Warren, and today I'm going to be discussing how to do an outline, an explicit thesis statement, sort of pre-planning for your paper. Now, first off, I want to just go over that, this isn't the only way you could outline a paper, right? There's multiple different ways, and depending on, right, maybe other instructors, preferences or their grading rubric, it might change, but for my purposes, this is sort of the one I recommend to students and the one that I'll be sort of grading you on, right? So, let's sort of talk about, first off, what is an outline and explicit thesis statement, right? So this assignment that we are going over is essentially outlining your paper, right? This way you're not starting with just a blank Word doc with no sort of I would say, direction, right, for your paper. This helps you to sort of visualize the paper, and in a way it's almost like building a puzzle, right? When you build a puzzle, you start with the pieces on the outside, and then you fill in the gaps, right? And I see an outline in the same way, right, where you've got at least the framework for the paper, now you gotta fill in the pieces. So, for our purposes, right, I want you to open up this document, right, called Outline and Explicit Thesis Statement. Again, I go over some more directions, but I'll just verbally tell you them as we move through this assignment. So, the first thing that you need to do, open up this document, open up a fresh blank document, and all I want you to do for my purposes is copy this template, so Control-C, open up your new one, Control-V, and that's all you need to do, right? You don't need to, for my purposes, I don't want you to change this. I want to challenge you to use an outline, and I want to provide one that I think is going to help you, right? Now, after this assignment, if there's some changes you want to make to this outline to better suit your paper, by all means, go ahead, but for our purposes, I want you to stick with this one for this assignment. So, before we continue, let's always do, right, put your name, date, class, etc., right? So, I was doing, pretend I'm a student tutorial, right? Tutorial, fun play on words, right? English, 110 or whatever subject we're in. And then the date, right? Which would be, I'll just put date. This way you don't know what day I'm doing it on. And then, Professor Warren, right? So we can just put, Professor Warren, right? And again, we want to make sure it's already, going to use the format painter here, which is a very handy tool. It helps to sort of copy the format that you want to, right? It's format painter. And then we also want to make sure, right, that we've got, go to insert, page number, right? Top of page. Come on, computer, there we go. And then, last name, right? Page number, then close header and footer. Okay, so now we're all ready to go, right? So, I've broken this down into how a paper should be, and we can put this out of the way, right, and get a bigger shot here. So, for our purposes, right, a traditional college paper, again, this isn't the only way you can write a paper, but traditionally, right, you're going to have an introduction, usually 3 body paragraphs, and then a conclusion, right? So, let's start with the introduction. So, these are sort of the basic elements you want in an introduction, right? You want some sort of attention grabber, some background information, and then your thesis statement, right? Students always ask me what they should do for an attention grabber, and I would say either find a fun fact, something you think people don't know, right, or just something that's interesting, right? I usually like to do something along the lines of finding a fun fact that people may not be aware of, right, and putting that there, right? Now again, this isn't copying and pasting a quote. You shouldn't start out with a quote, really. There's nothing that says you can't start with a quote, but because it's your paper and your voice, you should start with your voice. So either paraphrase, write a fun fact, or utilize something to get someone's attention, right? Background information. So here, right, you're going to put just some sort of background information to help introduce the topic that may not fit into your body, your 3 main claims, right? I had a student, for instance, that was discussing a paper on the war in Afghanistan, and basically their 3 main claims were why they thought the war in Afghanistan was wasn't a war the U.S. should have gotten into, just to make that pretty generic. So here, right, the background information they put was, just basic, very, very simply, what was the war in Afghanistan, how did we enter it, right? Because their three main claims were reasons as to why the war in Afghanistan was not a good idea, right? So they put background information here that was essentially just a little rundown to get people aware of what the war in Afghanistan was. So do something similar, right? Just provide enough here, right? This may be some definitions of key terms, right, that you're going to talk about. Say, for instance, this paper is on classism, right? It may be good here to sort of go over, well, what is classism before you then dig deeper into your paper. So whatever you think people need to know that doesn't really fit into what you're going to talk about later probably needs to go here. And then a thesis statement. So a thesis statement, again, is a topic. It contains a comment on that topic and usually 3 supporting details, right? And we always make sure your thesis statement is towards the end of your introduction. It should be the last 1 to 2 sentences of your introduction, because your thesis statement is the main argument for your paper, right? And you don't want to put it at the beginning of your introduction, right? Because by the time someone reads through that, they may forget. You want to put your thesis statement towards the bottom because that's the last thing that they're going to remember before they go into your paper. So, say for instance, right, we're doing a paper on, let's just do something very, very simple, right? Let's do, healthcare discrimination. That's not, simple, but, something that I read a lot of papers on, so I know generally what people argue when they do this paper, right? So, say your thesis statement is something along the lines of, in this, paper, I will argue, what healthcare discrimination is, how it impacts women of color, and what the healthcare system, and what let's just say, and what the public can do to address this issue, right? We could do something along the lines of that, right? And I would also argue, what I would also make sure that we put, that we're focusing on healthcare discrimination in the United States, right? Because it's different in other places in the world. So, in this paper, I will argue what healthcare discrimination in the United States is, how it impacts women of color, and what the public can do to address this issue, right? So, essentially, right, this is the topic, right? Healthcare discrimination, right? And our comment on it is essentially, right, that it exists, right? I will argue what, what healthcare discrimination is, right? So that's our topic, our comment, and then our 3 main claims, which is, what it is, how it impacts, women of color, right? And then what the public can do to address this issue, right? Now, obviously, right, healthcare discrimination can also impact, men of color as well, but maybe for the sake of brevity, right, the student's only going to focus on women of color, right? So, this should be, right, main claim 1, body paragraph 1, main claim 2, and main claim 3, right? So, we can go ahead, right, and put for our first main claim, right, what it is, right? Our second one, as we scroll down. Oh, come on. Come on, Microsoft. There we go. What it is, how it impacts, women of color, and then, I'm just going to put very simply, how to fix it, right? I obviously am not going to say that, but that just sort of gives us kind of an idea, right? So now we're essentially done, right? We've got a good thesis, it's explicit, right? It's not just something that's very generalized, right? It's got a topic, it's got a comment on that topic, and then it's got 3 main claims, right? Now, definitely, right, we can go into this next one, right, but I would say go into whatever main claim you're strongest about, right? So say, for instance, right, more about how it impacts women of color, maybe more than how to fix it, right? So maybe you want to start here and then go back to the other ones, right? Maybe to the ones you're not as comfortable with, right? But for our purposes, right, we're going to start with the first one, right? So what is it, right? So I can't just leave what it is, right? I at least want to try to sort of write out what this is going to be, right? Here, where it says, you know, main claim 1, I want to at least give a sentence, an introductory sentence that I could use when I actually write this body paragraph, right? So, when you, for the first line of every sort of body paragraph, or at least every topic in your paper, you want to have a sentence that not only introduces that idea, but connects it back to the main argument. So, for instance, I could say something along the lines of, you know, before discussing more into how health, right, so before discussing more into how healthcare discrimination impacts people, I want to first address what this issue is, right? So, as you can see, right, I'm sort of tying it back into the main argument, right, where I'm saying, hey, right, remember we're talking about healthcare discrimination, but then I put in that main claim, right, the first main claim. This helps to tie it back to my argument, this way people understand how it fits into my argument, as well as saying, hey, right, remember, this is the main claim we're talking about right here. And this is literally all you can do. This may take you 1 to 2 sentences, but try not to go over that, right? If you find yourself having to take 3, 4 sentences to tie it back to your, you know, thesis statement as well as introduce it, then you probably don't have a good idea of what it is, right? However, right, we got the first sentence of this body paragraph, this little topic area, we have healthcare discrimination, tying it back to our argument, what it is. Now, here, this is where you want to go into your research, right? Whether you're using an academic article here, a credible internet source, or a book, right? Here, I would highly recommend either pull a quote out, if that's what you want to do right here, or paraphrase a section, right? So, let's say, for instance, you wanted a quote, right? We could do something along the lines of, and I'm making this up off the top of my head, right? So don't take this as truth. You know, healthcare expert, Dr. Smith, right, argues that, you know, blah, 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 you know, put in my quote, and then since we're doing MLA, right, we've already said his name, so all we have to do is, you know, put the page number, you know, let's say it came from 235, right? End quote. Here, right, I've either pulled out a quote, right, or I've paraphrased that sort of information here that will defend this main claim, right? And then afterwards, you should elaborate, right? You know, we could do something as simple as, you know, in other words, right? What Dr. Smith is saying is that, you know, blah, 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 right? You never want to throw in a quote and never elaborate or give context afterwards, right? We've sort of talked about this in class. It's called quotation sandwiches, where you introduce the quote, you give the quote, and then you elaborate. What is the quote saying? How does it fit into your argument? Because remember, anytime you are pulling out a quote, you're missing the context of where that quote came from. And even if you think it's understandable, it may not be understandable to other people, right? Because again, you know, people love inspirational quotes. And if you ask one person what it means and another person what it means, they're going to have 2 different answers, right? So always, even if you think that it's self-explanatory, afterwards you need to provide maybe a bit of context, and at the very minimum, tie it back into your argument, right? What is Dr. Smith saying that helps to defend your point, right? Or add to your point, or maybe disprove your point, right? Depending on what angle you're going with. And then you do the same thing, right? Either paraphrase, pull out an example here, and elaborate. Again, at minimum, for every sort of body paragraph or major topic, you should have, you know, roughly for a 5-page paper, 2 pieces of supporting evidence. I also provide a third one here. This one's optional for you guys, but if you feel like you need to pull another piece of evidence here to really help defend that point, I just provide that there for you. Alright, so now that you've got, your introductory sentence to this main claim, you've got, some supporting evidence, or paraphrase, you've got that elaboration, now you can do what's called evaluation. So here in sort of this section, right, you need to start sort of either, wrapping these ideas up, giving your final thoughts, or at least addressing things that, maybe you didn't get to address with evidence that needs to be brought in to sort of, help solidify this main claim, right? So here you can do, something along the lines of, as evidenced by, these authors maybe, right? These authors, one can see that healthcare, I keep doing that today, healthcare discrimination, is yada yada yada, right? Whatever it is, right? Here you need to sort of, right, evaluate the claim that you made, right? Start to wrap it up, as well as address any other things that may need to be addressed, right? Maybe here is also a good place to, maybe debunk, right, some claims that people make about healthcare discrimination, right? Or whatever it is you think needs to be done here. And then finally, you need some sort of transition sentence. So here, right, you should start to move into the next idea, right? And so let's look at a way you could do that, right? So here I could say, right, because I need to sort of address this claim and now move into the next claim, I could do something along the lines of this, right? Let's see. Now that, I've unpacked what, healthcare, keep doing that today, healthcare discrimination is, now that I've unpacked what healthcare discrimination is, it is important to understand how it impacts one of the, most vulnerable populations in the United States, right? Let's fix that. Okay, so as we see, right, I've sort of readdressed, right, hey, right, we just got done talking about healthcare discrimination. That should be populations, my bad. And now I'm going into the next one, right? So I'm sort of implying, right, that, hey, right, women of color, right, are some of our most, vulnerable populations in the United States, right? Or I simply could just replace it with, how it impacts, women of color in the United States, right? Multiple different ways I could go about that, but let's just, go along with this one. Now, for your second main claim, or your second sort of topic, as well as your third topic, right, you do the same thing that you just did with that one, right? You give me a good, introductory sentence that readdresses, your thesis statement and introduces that idea. You pull evidence, you elaborate on how it defends that point or what it's saying. You then sort of wrap it up, right, or provide anything else you need to help defend that point, and then you transition, right? You do that, 2 more times after that. Or heck, maybe you need to have a fourth topic, depending on what your argument is, right? And then finally you go into your conclusion, right? So now you need to restate your thesis, right? So it's not as simple as, going up here and, oh, I'm just going to copy and paste it, right? First off, if we did that, right, where we copied and pasted it, right? First off, it says in this paper, right? I have students that do that, so don't do that. This is one of the most obvious ways you just copy and paste it, right? However, we could, just put this thesis statement here, look at what we did, and then say, okay, how can I re-say this in the same way, right? And we could do something along the lines of, all in all, healthcare, I keep doing that today, geez, discrimination is real. It impacts, just to abbreviate, right, women of color, and is something, and is an issue that Americans can help to address, right? So, look what I did here, right? I have, again, my topic, healthcare discrimination, right? I've got a comment on that topic, right? Which for our purposes, right, healthcare discrimination, right, my topic about is that's real, and then I also have my three main claims, and one of those is, hey, healthcare discrimination, it's real, it impacts women of color, and it's something that people can do to help prevent, or at least to lessen the burden of, right? So, see how I'm literally saying the exact same thing I just said, but I'm doing it in a different way, right? So, make sure that you restate your thesis in a new way. Summarize your topic. So again, here, just very quickly summarize those things that you covered and what you came to the conclusion of, right? So again, take what you said in the main claim, in your three main claims, don't copy and paste it, but just sort of summarize what you talked, what you discussed. And then, towards the end of your conclusion, you can either end it with, hey, what do you want your audience to take away from, right? Or have some sort of call to action. You don't have to do necessarily both of these. You could kind of do both of these at the end if you wanted to, but these are sort of my suggestions for you, right? Either give them a call to action, say, hey, right, by the end of this paper, I hope that you understand the importance of healthcare, understand the importance of why we should care about healthcare discrimination in the U.S., and I encourage everybody to, maybe there's legislation out there that you want them to support, or you want them to contact their, House of Representative or their Senate members and get them to do something about it, right? Or you could just end it with, something along the lines of, hopefully by the end of this paper you understand the importance of being aware of healthcare discrimination, and you've now educated yourself next time you need to go to your healthcare provider, right? So do something along the lines of that, right, where you give some sort of, hey, I want you guys to do this, or I just want you to at least take this knowledge away. And then after that, works cited, right? I always recommend students to go ahead and put their works cited here. This way, it's easier when they have to, pull out quotes. You've got that works cited there if you need it, as well as it's sort of lessening, the burden of having to do this later, right? Just go ahead, get your works cited out of the way, and put it here in your outline. So, after all that, hopefully you've got a good outline for your paper, you've got a good idea of what you want to do. I know a lot of students don't like outlining papers, right? You think it might be busy work, but it's honestly something that is very beneficial to do, right? It's easier now, as you probably see, to sort of fill in the blanks, right? You've got a good idea of what you want to say, you've got your evidence already pulled, right? Really, the only thing that should happen during that writing process when you actually draft, right, is maybe as you're writing you realize, hey, right, that piece of evidence doesn't work here, right? Or, hey, I need to do more elaboration, I need to do X, Y, and Z, right? So I always recommend outlining. I personally outline. Now, again, my outlines don't look like this, but I think this is a good way, a good easy way for students to sort of learn how to do this outline process, right? As well as, hey, here's a template for you. You don't have to come up with, well, how do I outline? What do I need in this section? What do I need in that section? How do I transition between these two ideas? So, hopefully that was helpful. I can't wait to read your outlines, and as always, if you have any questions, just, contact me and we can go through this together, okay? Good luck, and I'll see you guys next time.